The Philadelphia Eagles might be preparing for a wide receiver move, but not the one most people think, because this isn't just about adding depth. This is about planning for a future where A.J. Brown might not be there anymore. And if that's true, then every move from this point forward isn't about improvement, it's about transition. Let's set the context quickly. There's growing uncertainty around Brown's long-term future in Philadelphia. Nothing confirmed, nothing public, but enough smoke to force the organization into contingency planning. At the same time, a trade idea emerges: bring in Dontayvion Wicks from the Green Bay Packers for a mid-round pick package. On paper, it's a low-risk move. A developmental receiver, flashes of production, affordable cost, but the timing of this idea is what matters, because it's not random. It's aligned with the draft window and potentially aligned with a much bigger decision behind the scenes. The obvious narrative is simple. The Eagles lost depth at wide receiver. They want another option alongside DeVonta Smith. Wicks fits as a complementary piece. He's young, he's shown flashes, and he can step into a rotational role without disrupting the core offense. Even if Brown stays, this move makes sense. You're adding insurance, you're building depth, you're preparing for injuries. That's standard roster management. But here's where the situation becomes more complex. Because Wicks isn't just depth, he's a signal. When a team targets a receiver like Wicks specifically, it tells you what they're preparing for stylistically. He's not a true WR1, he's not a volume-dominant target, he's a system receiver, someone who fits into structure, not someone the structure revolves around. And that matters, because it suggests the Eagles may be preparing for an offense that functions differently. Let's go deeper. With Brown on the field, the Eagles' passing game has a clear identity: physical dominance, isolation routes, winning one-on-one matchups regardless of coverage. Brown doesn't just run routes, he tilts coverage. Defenses have to account for him pre-snap. That changes everything for the quarterback. But if Brown is removed from that equation, now the offense shifts toward distribution, timing routes, spacing concepts, multiple options instead of one focal point. And that's where Smith becomes central. Now consider this. There's internal belief that Smith hasn't reached his ceiling, that he has another gear, that with a higher target share, he could produce at an entirely different level. That's not just optimism, that's organizational direction. Because if you truly believe that, then moving on from Brown becomes more than possible. It becomes logical. Clipping moment number 1. This isn't about replacing A.J. Brown. It's about deciding if the offense needs him at all. Now, bring Wicks back into the conversation. His production has been modest, flashes, not dominance, but what he offers is flexibility. He can line up in multiple spots. He can operate within structure. He doesn't demand targets. That's exactly the type of receiver you add when you're building around a system, not a superstar. And that's the subtle shift happening here. Here's the hidden factor most people are missing. This isn't just about wide receivers, it's about the quarterback. Because how you build your receiver room directly reflects how you want your quarterback to play. With Brown, the quarterback has a bailout option. Throw it up, trust the matchup, let your best player win. Without Brown, the quarterback has to process faster, read the entire field, distribute the ball, stay on schedule. That's a completely different mental demand, and it changes how pressure impacts decision-making. Clipping moment number 2. A dominant receiver simplifies decisions. A balanced offense demands precision. So now the question becomes, what version of the offense do the Eagles want under pressure? Because in critical moments, structure breaks down. And when it does, elite receivers matter more than ever. Brown gives you margin for error. Without him, execution has to be cleaner, tighter, more exact. Now let's identify the turning point. It's not the trade itself. It's what happens after the draft. If the Eagles come out of the draft without adding a top-tier receiver, that's your signal. That means they're comfortable with a transition. That means they believe in Smith as the centerpiece. And that means any move for someone like Wicks isn't depth. It's preparation. Because once you pass that point, the decision is no longer theoretical. It's operational. Clipping moment 3. The draft won't reveal their plan. What they don't do will. Now zoom out to the big picture. If Brown stays, the Eagles maintain one of the most physically dominant receiver duos in the league. Their identity remains intact. Their margin for error stays high. But if Brown is moved, this becomes a different team. More balanced, but less explosive, more structured, but less forgiving. And everything shifts onto Smith's development. Not just as a playmaker, but as the focal point. That's a massive responsibility. There's also a long-term financial layer. Moving on from Brown could free up resources, allow investment in other areas, offensive line, defense, quarterback support. That's how teams evolve, not by reacting to the present, but by anticipating the next version of themselves. In the end, this isn't about Dontayvion Wicks. It's not even really about A.J. Brown. It's about identity. The Eagles are standing at a crossroads between two offensive philosophies, one built on dominance, the other built on distribution. And every move they make right now, every trade idea, every rumor, every quiet decision points to one reality. They're deciding which version of themselves they trust more when the pressure hits. Because in the NFL, games aren't decided by talent alone. They're decided by how clearly you understand who you are when everything breaks down. And right now, the Eagles are still making that decision. This isn't just a trade idea. It's a warning. Because while the Philadelphia Eagles keep saying nothing publicly about A.J. Brown moves like this, suggests they're already preparing for life without him. Quietly, strategically, and maybe sooner than anyone expected. The proposal sounds small on the surface, a fourth-round pick, a late swap. In return, the Eagles get Dontayvion Wicks from the Green Bay Packers. Not a blockbuster, not a headline move. But that's exactly why it matters. Because this isn't about replacing A.J. Brown. It's about insulating the damage if he's gone. And that changes how you read everything Philadelphia is doing right now. They lost depth already. Jahan Dotson is gone. The receiver room is thinner than it looks. And with DeVonta Smith stepping into a bigger role, the Eagles are facing a decision they can't avoid much longer. Do they double down on Brown or quietly start building around the idea that he won't be there? That's where this gets interesting, because internally there's growing belief in Smith, not just as a complementary piece, but as a true WR1. The kind of player who can handle a massive target share, the kind of player who might still have another level no one's fully seen yet. If the Eagles believe that, then A.J. Brown becomes something else entirely. Not untouchable, but movable. And now the timing starts to line up. The draft is approaching, April 23rd to 25. Decisions will be made behind closed doors, but nothing gets revealed. Not yet. Everything stays controlled, quiet, until after. Because once the calendar flips past June 1st, everything opens up, financially, strategically, logistically. That's the turning point. And suddenly, a move for someone like Wicks doesn't look random anymore. It looks like preparation. Because Wicks, for all his inconsistency, has shown flashes. Production in his first 2 seasons. Enough versatility to fit into Sean Mannion's system. Enough upside to be more than just depth. Not a star, but a bridge. And sometimes that's exactly what teams need when they're about to make a bigger move. Because here's the reality. If A.J. Brown stays, Wicks is just another piece. But if Brown goes, he becomes part of the transition, part of the attempt to stabilize an offense that just lost its most physical, most dominant presence on the outside, and that's where the risk lives. Because you don't replace A.J. Brown with one move, you don't replicate that production, that presence, that impact. You absorb it, spread it out, adjust the system, hope the sum holds together. But hope isn't a strategy, and right now the Eagles are walking a line between control and contingency. Because this trade proposal isn't about what they're doing today, it's about what they're preparing for tomorrow. And if that tomorrow includes moving on from A.J. Brown, then this is where it starts.